Thank you for coming today. The presentation I'm going to give you today is about Spanish language acquisition. And I know it's about Spanish, so hopefully you can bear with me and find some way to apply what I teach you today into your own classrooms, especially the younger grades. They'll be, you can think about it as English as they are still, acquiring their English language. And more specifically, hearing native Spanish speakers through online media. So using that technology for our students to listen to native speakers speak Spanish and how that can apply to them and help them. So it all began as a wondering. And some of you probably are thinking, what is a wondering? In our class, we learned that a wondering is basically a question or an inquiry that we want to find more about. And as teachers, we often reflect on what we did throughout the day and things that are helpful and things that probably didn't help, things that worked, things that didn't work. We can think about behavior. And a wondering can be about anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be about something specifically academic. It can be about a behavior and how to address a certain student or specific problem that you're having in your class. But I love the last point. It says, seek change by reflecting on practice. So the whole purpose of having a wondering or an inquiry is to seek change and try to make a change in your classroom by being reflective and obviously research and all that kind of stuff. So my wondering began when I was getting ready to go to Argentina. And so obviously a long time ago. And I went to learn Spanish, and I was in my Spanish classes, and I thought, oh, I've got a good grasp on this. I understand Spanish, I know it. I got to Argentina and went out in the streets and thought I had zero idea what I was getting myself into. And as much as I thought I knew Spanish, I really didn't. And I thought at that moment that I was never going to be fluent in Spanish, that I was never going to be able to read Spanish, write Spanish, talk Spanish. I thought I was done for. That for the next 2 years I would just have to pretend like I knew what I was talking about. But about 4 months later I found myself being really fluent in Spanish, and I felt comfortable speaking Spanish, and I didn't have to think about it when I read and when I wrote. And so my wondering came in what aided me in learning Spanish, and how can I get that to my students, and how can they have some of the same type of experiences as they are learning Spanish, and what things helped me that could help them. So this is my main question, was how would hearing native speakers through online media aid my students in acquiring the Spanish language? So again, how technology and hearing the native speakers through online media could help my students, as I know that was a huge part of how I learned Spanish, was being exposed to it and immersed in the language. So I thought about Skype, online ebooks, videos, and I took a lot of time trying to find the best resources that are out there on the internet. My sub-questions were, how will these activities influence communication, comprehension, and pronunciation? How will these activities affect the attitudes of my students? And which online activities are most effective? So I dove into some literature to find what has been done, what research has been done on this topic, and I found a lot about immersion. But I'm going to tell you, when I was doing my research, I found very little on foreign language and how to acquire a second language. So there is very little out there, which was interesting to me. I thought for sure nowadays that we would have more research about foreign languages. But one of the main ways of teaching a second language is immersion. And this is where all subjects are taught in that second language. And obviously that's not an option here at River Hill. So that was kind of what stirred me into, well, what about hearing native speaking in just that short time that I have your students? One of the studies talked about the meaningful use of target language versus rote memorization, where most foreign language classes, they do rote memorization, whereas in an immersion class you're actually using the language so they can see how it's applicable in day-to-day conversation and use. One researcher found that people or students who were in an immersion classroom were more skilled in developing social communicative competence, so they were able to communicate better with their peers in that foreign language. And then I found this to be interesting, that impressive evidence that the academic achievement of students enrolled in immersion programs are better compared to non-immersion students. So that even in other areas they excelled more academically if they were exposed to immersion in whatever language. Another thing that I found on the internet that I found to be interesting was the dual language immersion. Does anybody know what that is? No? Okay. Well, it's basically immersion but with two different languages. So, for example, they would take half the students who are native in Spanish, half students who are native in English, put them together, and the teacher would speak both Spanish and English. And this was done in a Korean English class, one of the studies that I found. And they recognized the potential for it would help with bilingualism, biculturalism, and stronger ethnic identity. But the problem arose when the parents found inequity between the Spanish, for example, or in this case, Korean and English, where they would say, well, you're speaking more Korean than you are English, or you're speaking more English than you are Korean, and the tension kind of caused problems because they wanted to make sure that it was equal, that the Koreans were learning English and the people who spoke English were learning Korean. One thing was age-appropriate learning and teaching materials. There really is not a lot out there for the younger grades. There's a lot of things for high school and college in learning a foreign language, but one thing I found was they found to be difficult was finding age-appropriate learning material. Okay, so this is my, this is going to give you an insight to what I did. So I took 8 weeks of class, and you know I have them once a week for 30 minutes, and I started with my data collection. I did a pre-assessment on their pronunciation and how they communicated and what they comprehended, and I also gave them a survey of what their interest was, how they enjoyed Spanish class, was it fun, that kind of thing. I took field notes, so every day I would take notes on pronunciation problems that they were having or something specific that they were having with comprehension and write it down to remind myself of their progress and kind of see, and also to change my teaching and know where I needed to spend my focus. A reflection journal. I was able to think about every day what worked, what wasn't working, what technology they seemed to be enjoying, what they didn't, and that kind of changed my teaching as well. So it was very flexible and helped me to know, what I needed to change to keep them interested in going. And then obviously I gave them a post-assessment and post-survey so that I could compare what they did before the 8 weeks of using this technology and what was the result. So the implementation, I planned on having pen pals, and I worked so hard to try to find pen pals for Riverhill, and I failed miserably. I had a coworker that I used to work with, and she taught in Mexico. And I contacted her, and I couldn't work through her school. She said that they already had pen pals. And then I went to ePals. Has anybody heard of that? Global community. And I never got a response to pen pals. So I guess that's one thing with technology is that sometimes it just doesn't work. So that one, it kind of led me to want to do another wondering or research to find out what would the effect be of pen pals, because I think that would be really interesting. But we used a lot of online ebooks, and some of the websites that we used, I put them on here so I could show you. The lower grades, I obviously used a lot of songs and things that showed pronunciation, so I'm going to show you just an example. We won't listen to the whole thing, but one of the websites I found was Rockalingua, and this we did to the parts of the body, and the kids ask about it every time they come to class. So I'll let you watch just a little bit of it so you can. But they loved it. They asked to see this every time they came to class. So I know that kids really do learn a lot through song. So that was one of the interesting sites that we had. The other one, I'm just going to do it through here instead of going back to my PowerPoint. This is online free Spanish, and it has different levels, but it basically is, here I'll show you just this so you can see. For example, if we were learning about La Cara, I'd have the students come up and they could touch a button. And they could, and some of the other, like when we did farm animals, it would break it down into pronunciation and it'd give them exactly what the sounds were, and it was really, they loved it. So something simple like that as well. Let me get back to my PowerPoint here. Okay, with the upper grades, I don't know if they've told you, but 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th have been watching this mystery series on BBC, and it's called Mi Vida Loca. and it's about this, how they show it from the perspective, the video is from, it's like they are in Spain, and it talks about how they go through this whole series and try to figure out these mysteries, and it's very interactive. So this movie will stop and say, what would you say in this situation? And it's all in Spanish. So all they are doing is hearing Spanish from these speakers in Spain. And they love it, and they really interact with it really well. I'll show you later on, but one of the students said, if this was a normal show, I think I would watch it every day. So that was really cute. So this is my results. These are my findings of my wondering. My first sub-question was, how will these activities help in pronunciation? And the letters that they had the most difficult time with were the double R and double L and N, H, and J. And so when I was working with them, and we heard it on the technology, and we heard over the media, we heard it on a video or whatever, I was able to stop it, and we were able to address it. And I took video of Mally, and I'm just going to let you listen, and I'll try to point out. I know you guys don't know Spanish, so it might be hard, but hopefully, oh, hold on, they're both going. Okay. So this is her pre-video. So I took video of them before and after, but here's her pre-video. Okay, so perdón, how she said it is perdón, and you'll hear she in her after post video she does a lot better. Okay, so sigh was supposed to be sí, that means yes. I hope it's hard for me to explain it to you, but hopefully you can hear the difference in her accent. Okay, so that was the double L. She said me llamo instead of me llamo. Okay, and that was the Nye. ¿Cuántos años? It was supposed to be an Nye. Okay, and here is her post video, and hopefully you can tell, I know it's hard because you don't speak Spanish, but hopefully you can at least tell her accent and how it has changed over the past little bit. Okay, so you kind of get it, can you kind of hear it? I know it's hard because you don't speak Spanish, but you can tell a big difference between her pre-video and her post-video, that really she started to get the grasp of the accent and how those letters are pronounced. So my next one was, how will these activities influence communication and comprehension? And I think one of the main things was that their desire to communicate changed, especially with the older students with that Mi Vida Loca with the video. They had to say it correctly before it could move on to the next part of the video. And so they really had a desire to communicate and a necessity to communicate, because in this mystery they're so involved in there, they have to be able to say things to certain people to get the mystery solved. And so it became a necessity for them to communicate, and that's sort of what happened to me in Argentina, was that I had to learn how to communicate or I would have drowned. One problem that I found is balance, that using all this technology, it really needed, I could have let them just listen to native speakers all day, but they really did need instruction from me. So part of my wondering findings was that I had to balance that out, that I had to be able to instruct and let them listen and find that balance. Retention was a big thing. I only have them once a week, so I would send them off thinking, oh, they know it, and then the next week, a lot of times we would have to review a lot of things, which is hard. The formal survey that I passed out, some of the questions involved what they thought they had learned from Spanish, and 75% of the students said they feel like they learned Spanish better through using the technology that we've been using. So I thought that was interesting that they recognized that, yeah, I think I'm learning it better. My next sub-question was, which online activities are most effective? And it really depended on age and trying to figure out what was applicable to them and what really made sense to them. Interest and what could make it more realistic. I found the ones that were more authentic, they really did a lot better with, because it was something real and something that they could actually feel like they were experiencing. And I found that we need more technology, that we need more things out there for foreign language. And one thing, when I was doing this, I thought about digital storytelling and how neat that would be to try to implement that. And so obviously that would lead to another wondering, and I guess it never really ends. But the next one